What's up, everybody? And thank you so much for tuning in for another episode of the QB Factory Reboot brought to you by SB Nation and Bleeding Green Nation. We are recording today on Tuesday, September 6th. And on today's episode, we're going to be previewing what's to come with the Birds Week 1 game against the Detroit Lions this upcoming Sunday on September 11th. And so before we even get started, I'm your host, Raichele, Privette, as always, joined by my amazing co-host, the one and only QB expert, Mark Schofield. And before we jump into anything, don't forget to rate, don't forget to leave a review, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on social media at BGN Radio, on Instagram at Bleeding Green Insta, all that good stuff. But Mark, you have a quote, a song lyric, any of that?
I do. In today's show, a little bittersweet. We'll get to that in a second. But I'm gonna go movie quote today, and it's a pretty simple one. The Terminator. I'll be back. And the reference there is, this is my last show. I announced some news on Friday that I am stepping away from Touchdown Wire and some other places, and I will be announcing my next destination later this week. Teaser that will look for that on Thursday. I'm not going too far, but this is my last show here at the QB Factory. It's a bit bittersweet, and like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if I'm back at some point.
For sure. I have a quote from a movie, I guess, or show, and then we have a surprise for you guys. But before we get to that, my quote says, "I wouldn't trade it for anything. No, never. Your friendship is the best present ever." And that was for Mark, because he said last show, so it was from Winnie the Pooh.
Yep.
Not gonna get emotional, but yes, I
told you, I mean, doing this show has been awesome.
Yeah.
I wish I could keep doing it. It's been an absolute blast. Getting to know you is great. Like I told you this weekend, just don't forget me when you're huge and famous. Like, please don't forget me when you're huge and famous.
I will, I promise. But let's get to the reason the listeners are here. Mark, do you want to do the introduction, or do you want me to do the introduction?
Introduction? Wait, What are you talking about here?
I mean, I'm just going to go for it. I'm going to go for it. So we have a very, 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 very special guest for today's episode. A very familiar guest. Around here, he goes by Boss Man. You know, that's I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him.
Nobody would be here if it wasn't for him.
I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. He's the expert. And so I'm just going to, bring him in. He doesn't really need an introduction. You guys
No, he doesn't. You know who this is.
If you're
dear God.
See who it is. If you're listening, just say something for them so they can hear your voice.
So you thought that you could leave us without me coming in and doing one more show with you here on BGN for the Quarterback Factory. You're wrong, bud. I'm here to take over the show. I'm here to talk some birds, to talk about this week 1 matchup, and to see you off and congratulate you on your next step, which we're not announcing here. Like you said, you're going to do that on Thursday. But just extremely happy for you. I know it's fantastic news. And Thursday, I believe you told me, was the 8-year anniversary of your co-founding of Inside
My first
the Pylon.
piece Inside the Pylon went up 8 years ago Thursday.
Wow.
So we're bringing it full circle on Thursday.
It's been an 8-year journey for you. I've been with you for a lot of it. I started off as a listener of Inside the Pylon.
Quick kicks, baby.
Quick kicks. That's right. You and Chuck Zada. And I remember listening to that. And I was just starting to get into football a little bit deeper than I was at that point. I think 2012 is when I got like my first Game Pass subscription, and I started taking notes on everything, and I started really getting into it. And I remember Inside the Pylon being the thing that for me that was like, no, this is how I want to digest football. I want to take it to a deeper cut. And I remember listening to Quick Kicks and whatnot. I used to listen in like every Friday on my way to work and hope that you and Chuck would answer the question that I would submit on Twitter. I was just a literal nobody at that time, and you guys always had great answers for it. And you guys taught me so much about the game, and like that flap of the butterfly's wings kind of put me on my current path and my trajectory, and getting to have a deeper appreciation for the game led to Scouting Academy, which led to other opportunities in the podcast world, led to BGN and led to me now being, executive producer for the Team Community Podcast here at BGN and getting to work with wonderful people like Raichele. It's been awesome. So you've had such a huge impact on my career, and I know you've had such a big impact on the careers of so many others. And I'm glad to see you finally get what you've earned and what you deserve, and I couldn't be happier for you, bud. So I wanted to come in and talk some smack, and it ended up turning into this. But I'm just
it's getting dusty in here, man. It's getting dusty in here. See, I thought you were gonna come in and like, draw some historical reference and compare me to like some awful historical figure. Like I thought once your face popped up, I was just gonna get roasted for the next 30 minutes.
Well, I do have a historical reference if you guys will allow me to rant.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. It's not about you, and it's not even about quarterbacks. In a way, it's tied in there, but this show deals with more than just quarterbacks. So, as I've often said, Howie Roseman makes the most sense if we view him through the lens of 4th century AD Rome. I've said this a million times. I was just telling my wife this the other day. She was not listening. I think there's this perception maybe that's been kind of pushed aside by historians in the last couple of decades that there was that the 4th century AD Rome is like a time of weakness for Rome, part of the fall, as somebody like Edward Gibbon would argue over 6 just massive volumes. And yeah, you are coming off the heels of the whole crisis of the 3rd century, which lasts nearly 50 years. There's a million different emperors all duking it out. None of them really get it done. But in the 4th century, you get 2 quote unquote the greats in Constantine and Theodosius. They combined to rule for, I think, almost half the century. And when you look at the balance sheet, I think it's a time of like relative strength for the empire. The main reason I bring this up has to do with what Peter Heather wrote in his book, The Fall of the Roman Empire, which if you're watching on YouTube, I'm going to hold that book up for the gentle listeners. It's a pretty hefty one.
It's a meaty tome.
So when talking about Rome splitting the empire into eastern and western halves between co-emperors, he writes, quote, periodic conflict at the top was the price to be paid for the empire's success. He continues, periods of political stability were likely to be punctuated by moments of conflict before a new regime, effectively recombining a sufficiently wide range of interest, managed to establish itself. Sometimes the conflict was brief, sometimes extended, but the civil wars of the 4th century did not make the empire vulnerable. The propensity at the time to divide imperial authority achieved a better outcome than the refusal to do so had in the mid-3rd, when 20 legitimate emperors and a host of usurpers each averaged just 2 years in power, end quote. So if to summarize this and bring it all to football, if 3rd century Rome, with all of its struggles with barbarians and civil wars and rebellions and instability and the turnstile-like emperor comings and goings, if 3rd century Rome is like the Lions and Jets have been historically, just constantly cycling through the bad for decades, then I would argue that 4th century Rome is more like Howie Roseman and the Eagles, because there were no clear indications that 4th century Rome, especially in the East, was headed towards a collapse, despite almost like pre-planned civil wars and political strife that was kind of baked into the thing. And Howie's position was always stronger than it was generally believed at the time. And Howie has operated like a man who knew that his position was safe. That was never more clear than after the just horrible 2020 season, where instead of making moves and acting like a desperate man in a win now mode, he made moves that were clearly meant to bear the most fruit at 2, 3, even 4 years down the line. That security has allowed him to be bold. It has allowed him to weather disruptions. And while as we, as a fan base and analysts, have been understandably impatient and frustrated when we're in the inevitable valleys of this strategy that come with how he conducts his business in a win now league, we got to understand that Howie can take this team to the peak like he's done before. And overall, I've said this before, but I think we give Howie too much credit for when things are going well and too much criticism when they aren't. And these plans are so sensitive to things like injury luck, interpersonal relationships, team dynamics, weird bounces of the ball on the field. And the 31 other teams, they all have very smart people in charge. They have the same amount of cap to play with. It's hard to get to the top. It's even harder to stay there in this league. And you can jack that up to 100 when you have a disruption at the quarterback position, which is what we talk about on the show all the time.
Right.
And to that last point, Howie has to share in some of that blame going sideways. There's still a lot of unknown there, but he's also been patient in moving assets towards the future to safeguard against that if things go south with Jalen Hurts. And like, they can say they're all in on Hurts all they want, and they should say that, right? That's the right thing to say, but they should also protect themselves, because who really knows? And I think they've done that. So even if this turns out to be one of those cases where things fall a good deal short, because the expectations are sky high, national media, the Eagles are the darling of national media right now. Howie, at the end of it, if it falls short, can sit down with Lori and say, hey, we've got a lot of great pieces in place. We positioned ourselves to pivot if need be. Here's the plan moving forward. And Lori will probably look at that and go, yeah, I'd rather be that than the Lions or Jets. I'd rather be 4th century Rome with a little bit of conflict than 3rd century Rome with all of this, upheaval. And we'll all collectively wring our hands if that's what happens, and we'll spew fire on Twitter until preseason 2024 rolls around and we're right back on the hype bus. So, hey, and maybe he nails it this time around, which would, to wrap this whole thing up, be very, very cool. So that is my historical reference for today, my whole take on Howie Roseman and how we should view him in a more macro lens. So yeah, there it is.
Absolutely fantastic, my friend. So the follow-up question is this: are the expectations too high?
Yeah. I think they are, but I still think this is definitely a playoff competitor,
Right.
or at the very least should be. I think they're too high because of the questions with Jalen Hurts. And before I get labeled like a Jalen Hurts hater or anything like that, it's just an unknown. If you have an unknown at the most important position, if he's not taking a huge step forward or even a significant step forward this year, it can limit your ceiling. Now, you can still do what like the 49ers did with Jimmy G.
Right.
You can get to championship games. You can even get to a Super Bowl, but ultimately there are some limitations there. And the more limitations you have in this league, especially at the quarterback position, the more things you need to go right in other areas. You can't have injury concerns at other places where that make you weaker. You need the right bounces of the ball. Again, it's just so hard to win in this league. So I think the expectation should be that this is a very good football team that takes a step forward when it comes to beating other playoff caliber teams, which they didn't do last year. The offense should take a slight step forward again. And I think that's good enough to say, hey, we can kind of continue to push the chips in on this, into the next year, and just become stronger throughout that process. So I think the expectations are a little bit too high and should be tempered a little bit, but that doesn't mean that I think this isn't a team that isn't a serious playoff contender.
It's interesting. We're doing this Tuesday morning, and Steven Ruiz at the Ringer just dropped his quarterback rankings, which is incredibly well done, the graphics and all of that, and Steve's analysis. But putting the ranking aside, here's how he begins his Hurts section. We're in year 3 with Jalen Hurts, and I'm still not ready to make any grand declarations on what he could be. The development we've seen from him from his time at Alabama up until now has been impressive, but he still has a long way to go before establishing himself as a good starting quarterback. I think that's entirely accurate, right? That's spot on. And the question becomes, does he develop enough this year so that they remain all in on him, or B, does he do just enough that they remain relevant, but it doesn't convince people that he's the guy? Or even C, does it completely collapse? I guess those are the 3 options. And which do we think is the most likely? I know that it's hard.
And what do we need to see to be like, yeah, he's come along to a certain point that those weaknesses are less prevalent and the strengths are better. I think, when you look at what the Eagles did well with him, his ability to run for first downs and touchdowns, I mean, they're up there with the best in the league.
Yeah.
You look at the numbers, they're up there with Lamar. And the Eagles really leaned into this. They ran the most quarterback design runs and or option plays in the league. They were very successful with those. According to PFF, they landed above a 50% success rate on those designs. But with that success, you saw how the Bucs countered in the playoffs, loading the box with safeties, forcing the Hurts to win in ways that it has to be a key area of development for Hurts in 2022. He has to be better with his habits from a clean pocket by not causing unnecessary pressure on himself, is to limit those turnover-worthy plays, which would be a bonus, but I think that stems from the first point, keeping himself clean and not putting himself in a place where he has to make frantic decisions. So I think that gets cleaned up if he's able to clean up his habits in the pocket. He's just got to be a little bit better with his deep ball accuracy. I'm not asking for a Josh Allen jump from being, Josh Allen was one of the worst deep ball passers in the league accuracy wise to one of the best all of a sudden for whatever reason. I think Hurts is maybe slightly below average in terms of his deep ball. If he can get slightly, above on the plus side, I think that's a big win, because you need that deep ball to make teams pay when they remove that back end coverage support, and that should be able to open things up and also help the run game too. So I think that's really what you're looking for. Just a little more consistent, keep yourself cleaner when things are clean. Don't cause any problems for yourselves that will lead to turnovers and whatnot. So
yeah, I mean, I think the trade for AJ Brown was so huge for a number of different reasons. Like, yes, the chemistry between Hurts and Brown and the friendship and the relationship is a huge part of that. But I think the trade for Brown gets us in the direction of your later point, which is getting teams back into too high, right? Because we're living in this too high world. And like you said, Tampa Bay, they just loaded the box. They basically said, look, we're going to play single high. We're going to dare you to throw the ball because we don't think you can throw deep. Brown gives you, if not through him, the element of the deep ball, creating opportunities for Smith in more favorable situations, because now with Brown, you can move Smith around a little bit. You can play him off the ball. You can get him some freer releases. That gives him the ability to win downfield against coverage. And that perhaps gives them the ability to force teams out of too high, which gets them to where I think they want to be for the most part, which is running the football a little bit.
Numbers advantage in the box. Yeah,
exactly. I mean, this game right now is all about the numbers in the box. Like, we can quibble between, men in the box versus gaps in the box and run fits and things like that. Like there's nerdier conversations to be had. But I think the goal here with Brown and what they want to do gets to your point of, if they can throw teams back into too high, that's the world they want to live in.
Yeah. Raichele, what's
for you? Oh.
Oh, sorry. I was gonna toss it to you. You were taking it over, what you should do. This is your show. But I was curious. I was gonna ask you. Ben Solak asked me this a couple of years ago. It was like, what's your confidence level of Hurts as a franchise quarterback for the Eagles? And I think this was coming after, he got his first initial few starts in 2020, and we were looking into 2021. And I think I was like a 4 out of 10 at the time. Okay. I think I'm more like a 5 or 6 out of 10 at this point. He's won me over more than he hasn't. Especially with the off-field stuff. We know he's going to be a leader. We know he's going to inspire confidence. We know the players are going to play, hard for him. He separates himself from Wentz. It's a 180 in that degree. But it's still some things that I need to see on the field before I'm entirely convinced on him. So I'm at like a 5 or 6 out of 10. What's your level of confidence on Hurts moving forward? What's your number?
I think 6 is fair, based off of like all of the offseason talk. We know that, he's now surrounded by so many offensive weapons. So it falls on him. Like he has all of the necessary tools. The thing that really scares me is we talk so much about how with today and how quarterbacks who are more mobile, like they lean more so on the run, on their legs, because that's their strength. So my fear is the fact that we saw in a preseason, he went 6 of 6, but that's a preseason game. Can he do that consistently throughout the remainder of the season and not always just lean on his legs? Because I feel like that's where the shortcoming comes, because even though last year, the Eagles were run heavy and that was their identity, we know that that's not where they want to stay. So I just don't know if I see him being Jalen Hurts, and we know that he's going to lean on his legs, but also now having AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and also the run game. Like, I'm kind of confused as to like what's their identity going to be and how is there going to be like this balance with so much going on. So that's where I'm at. I don't know. I mean, all we can do is wait and see, but I get a little bit nervous when I think of Hurts and how he's going to fall into that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a 6 too. I think that's entirely fair. And it's something that we've talked about, for years on this show. Hurts dropping his eyes. Like, he fought against that a lot last year. Like, we talked a lot about the Denver game where you could literally see him fight that urge to bail from the pocket. I mean, it's Stevens right up from the Rainer quarterback rankings. I mean, his biggest weakness is his pocket presence. That's the thing. Like, everybody asked me, like, what do you need to see from Hurts to be convinced that he's the guy? And, they want to hear numbers. And it's like, no, I want to see that. I want to see where his eyes are on 3rd and 7. And he feels that he sees that flash of color, not even up front, because I can get that, like on the edges. What does he do there? Does he try to run out the back door, as we've seen so many times before, and run himself into that trouble that Mike talked about earlier? Or does he click and climb in the pocket? Does he like make a stick throw after climbing the pocket on 3rd and 7 to hit somebody either over the middle or on the outside to move the chains? If we see that on a consistent basis, and I don't really care about the numbers, that's what I want to see. If we continue to see the same mistakes he made in Tuscaloosa, in Norman, and as a first-year starter last year in the pocket in terms of his pocket management, you're never going to learn it then. Like if you're doing that in year 3, you're not going to learn it. Year 3 is the Bill Walsh critical year for quarterbacks, right? This is the figure it out year. And yes, everybody's saying, oh, Josh Allen, year 3 leap. Like Josh Allen might be one of one, okay? But you want to see Jalen Hurts be better in this huge glaring weakness that he was when the last year ended.
Yeah. I mean, what happens when he sprains his ankle? What does it look like then? You know, what happens when you take away that mobility? Because he's carrying the ball so much. Injuries are bound to happen anyway to a quarterback in this league. What does it look like when he sprains his ankle? Does the offense still function like it should? Because if we see that, then okay, cool. Then I'm in. Right. Yeah. So yeah, it's fascinating. You're right. The 3rd year is the figure it out year. I think the Eagles have been right to be patient. I think we should be patient with Hurts. I think we have to this point. Bucs game aside, I thought Hurts did everything to earn himself another prove it year. So I don't want to just make it seem like we're bagging on the guy this whole time. This is part of the development of a young quarterback and figuring out if he's the guy. And development is not linear because teams in the NFL will figure you out if you don't have a counter punch. If you're Jared Goff and you can't deal with certain things, period, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, then you're kind of screwed in this league, and you're just going to be kind of limited. So if Hurts can function in the pocket when things are clean, if Hurts can function when some of his running ability is taken away either by injury or by defensive schemes, then I think we're cooking with gas at that point, and then the expectations are warranted to your earlier question.
So since you brought him up, anybody got any Jared Goff takes?
I had a question, Kist. You're the guest of the hour.
Okay.
So looking back, like Jalen Hurts and Jared Goff were kind of in the similar situations, both of them under pressure and a little bit. We saw how Jared Goff looked in 2018 compared to 2021. So let's talk about what's it going to look like for him. What does success look like for Jared Goff going into this season?
I'm not sure because it's there's so many things around Goff have to be right in the offensive scheme, the playmakers, the offensive line, especially for Goff for things to go well. I think Goff at times for spurts can look like a top. There have been times in his career where he has looked like a top 5 quarterback when everything is clean around him. When things are clean around him and he's dealing, he can look really stinking good. If he's under pressure, and like analytics people and whatnot will tell you, stats under pressure are not a sticky stat, and they aren't. But for some quarterbacks, they are. Goff is one of those few quarterbacks because he's never really improved under pressure, not statistically, nor just as when you look at him on film. Mark did a study a couple years ago, and it was like, okay, what does the EPA for a quarterback look like, when they've taken 0 hits? What does it look like when they've taken 1 in a game? What's it look like when they've taken 2 or 3? Okay, now what's it like when they hit 4 or 5? And Goff falls off a cliff once he's harassed a certain amount of times. And that's always been the case with him. Just everything falls away. He won't step into throws. I mean, I remember watching the Dallas playoff game, and they were in the red zone, and he made one throw to the end zone, and he had pressure in his face, and he wouldn't step into it. I'm like, if you're not going to step into this throw in a playoff game, when are you ever going to step into a throw when there's pressure in your face? And I think that's the one main failing with Goff. And I last year we can look at his results and say, yeah, his big time throws weren't there. He was not aggressive down the field. I think that has somewhat to do with the playmakers he had available to him. Kenny Golladay, was gone, whatever. So I think him being just a coward in general, not pushing the ball down the field, not being able to deal with pressure is always going to limit his ceiling. It was something that he was never able to move on from. And he's going to have a long career probably because of it, but ultimately the high points are never going to be as high as they were with Sean McVay and with things the way they were with the Rams. I think this is a good test for Jonathan Gannon in terms of, okay, last year Gannon was very conservative. Didn't have the right pieces in place to be more aggressive. We were constantly asking, why are two bad linebackers on the field? Well, on passing downs, because we didn't have a viable third safety. So which one do you want? Either way, you're kind of screwed. We can't blitz that much because we just don't have the guys on that can play on the island, and so on and so forth. So it's all very conservative shell meant to limit explosive plays, which they did for the most part, but ultimately you were left wanting more. You didn't want to get carved up for 90% by every decent quarterback that you came across. Now all the pieces are in place, and you're going up against a quarterback that you see can get rattled, and has been rattled against the Eagles before, visibly rattled against the Eagles in the past. You have that historical precedence. So if you're not necessarily getting there with 4, will Gannon ramp up the pressure and say, no, we need to move Goff off the spot? Because the moment that you take Goff off of his natural launch point, that's the moment when everything unravels for him. The Eagles have to do that, and they have to do it with 4 with their pass rush, or they need to start bringing some heat, because if they can do that, then Goff's just going to unravel for the entire game.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much Garoppolo on steroids, right?
Right.
That's what he has those moments where he can throw the ball to all levels with accuracy, but the second things start to break down, whether it's from a protection standpoint or from a coverage rotation standpoint, that's when it completely goes south. I mean, let's not forget Super Bowl 53, right? That was when Goff and McVay were at the peak of their offensive powers, and the Patriots did one thing in that game that completely made him melt out. It was they put 2 defensive calls in the huddle, and the second that radio headset cut off in Goff's helmet, they rotated. They made it audible up front, and Goff had to figure it out on his own, and he couldn't. He had, we were just talking about athletic quarterbacks and crutches, right? With Hurts. Well, for Goff, he had a huge crutch, which was Sean McVay in his ear. And that's kind of gone now. And, we saw what ended up happening in Super Bowl 53 with that. He couldn't figure it out. The other thing with Goff is what plays off of that. He always hesitates. You think back to the most pivotal play in that game. Brandon Cooks on that over route, that deep post route, where he hesitated for one split second from a clean pocket and gave Jason McCourty time to come from the opposite sideline to break it up. Like Goff, you have to exploit the hesitation with him. And so for Gannon, to that point, if he could get him to hesitate for a half second, even in clean pocket situations, with a rotation, with a blitz that he has to sort of figure out, with something, even if it's everybody's most hated coverage on earth, 2 invert, where you just run it just to confuse him, that could work. And this is, I think, a great test, obviously, for Hurts, like we talked about all season long. But forget it, this game is created in a petri dish to prove to all of Eagles Twitter and to prove to basically the rest of the NFL that you now have the pieces to run the defense that everybody has been dying to see from the Philadelphia Eagles for the past year.
All right. Yep.
So talking about defense, there's a lot of new additions to the Eagles roster. We already know that. When we're talking about the defensive side of the ball specifically, Kist, are there any players that you're most looking forward to see?
Yeah, I know. Go ahead. You've been waiting. You've had this one queued up for a week, haven't you?
What do you from the defensive perspective? Well, I want to see Hassan Reddick. I think is just like one of the more underrated additions, has been not really talked about. How does Kaiser White function? If Kaiser White is good, then we don't need a 3rd round pick into Kobe Dean to be an immediate impact contributor, because it solves at least one of the positions at the second level. I wish Derek Barnett could do a single thing and then not wipe it out by having a stupid penalty. That would be sweet. So that's 3 things I'm looking for. Is Marcus Epps the guy you were alluding to, Mark?
No, absolutely not.
Who is it?
A recent acquisition, basically a week ago today.
Oh yeah,
Chauncey.
Drama.
Of course. Number one, I think elite cornerbacks need one trait, and that is that they never have their mouthpiece in before the snap. Yeah. And that's just like a metaphor for like how great cornerbacks are. I think Chauncey is like the all chirp team captain. This guy, he can get 25 penalties in a year. I don't care. I want 4 interceptions, which he has great ball skills. I want 4 interceptions, and I want 2 forced ejections. I want him to get in the head of an opposing wide receiver so much that they just go whims on him and they just can't help themselves but throw a headbutt at him, throw a punch at a helmet, which is the dumbest thing in the world. I want him to get in their freaking heads. And I think with the addition of Chauncey adds for them, he wants to play safety and all this stuff. Well, safety still plays nickel a lot of times. Yeah. They still have, covers responsibilities down in the box or in the slot, so on and so forth. It allows them to, if they're going up against a guy that Maddox doesn't match up well with, which Maddox has little tiny T-Rex arms, 29 inches, right? He just doesn't physically match up well with some wide receivers and can't press him, can't play some tight man. Chauncey will get up in their grill and play tight man and be all over him. Like I said, he might get a couple holding calls here and there, might get a pass interference. I don't care. You know what I mean? Hold every play and make them call it every play if that's what they want to do. But like get in, reroute somebody. Be in there and be physical. Don't lose because you're not physical enough. And I think when you look at that defense, they shouldn't lose. They shouldn't be out physical by anybody, especially up front. And then you add somebody like Chauncey, who's just so freaking aggressive. I'm so excited about. I'm sure the gentle listeners, if they've been with us for a while, remember going into that draft. Chauncey was a top 20 player for me. He was actually number 20 on my board. I was shocked when he fell the way that he did. I thought there was some massive off the field problem with him that was just never revealed. And then he goes out there and he plays like a top 5 nickel corner. For his time in New Orleans. So I think Chauncey adds. I mean, Howie is taking the Saints to the cleaners in terms of the 2 trades that he made with them in the offseason. And Howie is going so in on this push. Chauncey's just another example of that. I remember before they signed Bradbury, I was talking with Raichele in one of our one-on-ones. I'm like, maybe you can do something like 5 free agents that are still out there that could make an impact on the team. And Bradbury was at the top of that list. And Howie has taken all this and gone, I'm going to fill every single possible weakness that I can. So even if the quarterback position, we aren't elite there, everything else is so well in place across both sides of the football that there's going to be no question that we can be a competitive football team. And Chauncey's just another sign of that. And I'm so excited to see him probably more after the play and before the play than I am during the play, even though he's a doggone good football player.
I think that the Chauncey trade is another example of Howie and sort of forward thinking. Earlier in August, Robert Mays wrote a piece on the evolution of the slot receiver. It used to be 5 years ago, 3 years ago, your slot receivers were Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, like smaller, quicker, shiftier guys.
Right.
The league has shifted schematically, perhaps in part due to the influence of the wide zone, outside zone, McVay, Shanahan. Now you need slot receivers that can block, that can insert.
You're playing Chris Godwin in the slot, who's a big dude.
You're playing bigger guys, more physical guys in the slot. Now you need physical corners in the slot. Like your smaller, shifty slot corners that are like 5'7" with T-Rex arms, like you said, that's not the model now. Those guys are going to get beat up. Those guys are going to get worked on. So you need somebody like a Chauncey that can match that physicality in the slot. And I think with the league moving in that direction, and if you have visions of being a top-tier team, matching up with the Buccaneers, matching up with the Rams, you need somebody that can align in the slot against Kupp, against Godwin. Now you've got your guy.
Mm-hmm. Raichele, who are you looking for? Who are you looking forward to on defense? Who's your
definitely Chauncey. I mean, everybody loves somebody with that scrappiness, dog mentality for sure. I've been banking on James Bradbury going into this season. I'm a little bit confident to see him. So definitely probably those 2 players are at the top of my list right now. What about you, Mark?
But you can't hide your wide receiver when you have Bradbury out there too. You can't hide. Yeah,
I mean, for me, it's Bradbury.
Camp, yeah. He's been really good in training camp.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's Bradbury. Because now you need 2 top corners in this league. Like, remember, I mean, I am my heart a Patriots fan, and I remember years of Stephon Gilmore and then the emergence of J.C. Jackson at the opposite corner. Like, when you have the ability to just say, like, look, we don't need to travel, we don't need to worry about that. Like, if you want to put your wide receiver 1 on the left side or the right side, we're fine. We're good. That's a great strength to have. And Gannon, again, this gets back to the idea that Gannon has all of his tools at his disposal now to have the defense that we've been clamoring for a year and a half. Now we need to see it.
No excuses.
Yeah. And I really hope that my run here at QB Factory ends with a take on the defensive side of the ball. I think that's appropriate.
Nice. I mean, okay, Kist, it's only right that while you're here, we get record predictions. Do you see the Eagles making the playoffs? So give us your thoughts there.
Yeah, I think what's the over under on the win total for the Eagles? Is it something like 11.5 or is it 10.5? What's that number? Because I can
try to pull that up right now.
Yeah, but
I think see 9.5 right now.
That's ridiculous. They're hating.
Yeah,
that's insane.
That's a hammer the over situation.
I'm hammering you. So to answer the question in that framework, I'm hammering the over on 9.5. What are you kidding me? And I'm probably saying 12-5.
I'm with it.
12-5 feels right, and I feel
that does feel right.
Yeah, I think they at least win one playoff game. From there, like who knows? Who knows what happens throughout the season and whatnot, and what other teams look like, and how the seeding works out, so on and so forth. But I think they definitively win the NFC East. The Cowboys have only gotten worse, and Mike McCarthy's a joke. The Commanders are whatever. The Giants, they're not even like fun bad. They're just like bad. Like,
I mean, when your general manager is coming out a week before the season saying, "Look, it is what it is. It's the hand we were dealt." Yeah. Like, that's not a good situation, right? Yeah. I mean, that's not great. Washington is what it is. Dallas, everybody was saying all season long, like, you got to have some depth there, Jerry, Steven. And then what happens? You lose
everybody.
Smith, your starting left tackle, who's been slowing down a little bit right before the season. And so the rookie tackle you drafted to eventually play left tackle that you've had at left guard the entire season now has to play left tackle. But then you bring in Jason Peters on the cusp of the season, who's my age. Like, it's not great.
It's going to be painful, though. I love Jason Peters, and I thought he got so much flack when he didn't necessarily play well.
It's going to be hard to watch.
It's going to be tough seeing him in a Cowboys. And look, he exceeded expectations last year with the Bears. I will say that. Like, I feel like he was the healthiest that he had been. But I just can't see him lasting for a full season at this age again. Right. I think that's his one last hurrah good run with the Bears. And now it's like, brother,
the plan is probably like getting like 8 weeks out of him at left tackle.
Yeah.
Until Smith is ready to go, slide in from guard to tackle. And like, you're planning to rearrange the offensive line around Halloween anyway. Like, that's not a good approach. Good luck with that.
Well, yeah. Is there anything else you want to talk on before we wrap this episode up?
Actually, what's your record prediction if you haven't given
it? 12-5. That was mine as well. So
that was yours?
That was mine. Yeah.
I'm 12-5 too, but I'm going to be more optimistic, say 13-4.
Oh,
why not?
Okay.
Why not? Let's go all big.
I love it.
Mike's been yelling at me for years to actually have takes, so here we go, 13-4.
There's no excuse this season.
They definitely win at least one playoff game. I would even say they might win two.
Yeah. I will be very, very disappointed if they don't win one playoff game.
Yeah.
As loaded as this roster is, like, there's no excuse.
Yeah. I mean, provided you avoid injuries and all that stuff. Like, if we're talking about Gardner Minshew around Halloween, then it's a different story.
Yeah.
As much as we love Gardner around here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I put my take out there, like I always tell Mark, have a take,
and then go hide for a little bit.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, that's what
Twitter. I mean, we all have bad takes, right? That's part of the deal.
That's the game. That's what we signed up for.
So yeah, I think I've hit on everything I wanted to, Mark. Again, can't thank you enough. I look forward to what you got coming up next. But Raichele, thank you for inviting me on as well. It's been an honor to come join you guys. The show has been in great hands since I left, and I'm excited to see, what at BGN what the next evolution is that we're currently working on as we head into the season. Thanks to this recent news. But I just had a wonderful time being on here. And I know we're supposed to be doing something together with me and Solak, getting together with BGN Radio for a quadcast in the future. We want to do something tied to charity for that. We haven't just been able to line up the schedules for it. So you still have that to look forward to, gentle listeners. And hopefully after that, things go well for me and I never have to do another podcast again.
Everybody's always going to want you back. So
yeah, the people need more Kist in their lives. That's what I'm
for
going to
sure.
say.
My wife would disagree, but I appreciate it. My marriage is fine.
Your marriage is fine. Our marriages are fine.
But thank you, Kist, for joining us.
Thank you, buddy.
We already know the gentle listeners are going to appreciate it. Mark, thank you so much for everything you've done. I've learned so much just from working with you this past year. But that's going to be a wrap for this episode of the QB Factory Reboot. Once again, don't forget to rate, leave a review, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. And yeah, Mark, do you have any last words?
Well, Raichele, it has been awesome getting to know you over the past year. It's been a joy doing the show, Kist, buddy. Love you guys to death, both of you guys. It's been a pleasure and an honor. And for one last time, go Eagles.
Go Eagles.